the other quarterback that is drawing national attention is Jaden Rashada. Jaden Rashada, according to reports, has now officially asked for his release from Florida, his letter of intent. So it looks like the Gators will be riding with Graham Mertz next year. But The Athletic a couple of days ago, and I moved this step by step on my call sheets here, all the way from last week when they did this story. They've got a timeline.
Okay.
They've got a timeline.
A Jaden Rashada timeline?
Yeah, and some of you may forget, when we talk about NIL deals, some of you may forget just how big this NIL promise was. So before you start killing Rashada, Jaden Rashada in all of this, let's remember where the Florida Collective has a role in this. November 10th is the day The Athletic says is when the Florida Collective, whoever that is, reached an agreement with Rashada to pay him $13 million in NIL money while he was a Florida Gator. Now, that wasn't a one-year deal. It was for his entire time at Florida.
Yeah, so
November
basically,
10th.
Yeah, so basically a $3 million a year contract.
Yeah, November 10th, or if he's there 3 years, whatever.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
But he's going to make $13 million for his time at Florida.
Okay.
And that was agreed to on November 10th. On December 7th, the CEO of that collective sent a termination letter to him,
right,
saying we're backing out.
Yep.
We were backing out of that. On December 21st, National Signing Day, Billy Napier, according to The Athletic's news conference, was delayed 67 minutes from its announced time, where it is believed by several reporters Napier was on the phone with Rashada multiple times trying to, is he in or is he out of the commitment process.
So if I could call it timeout in the timeline. So he had committed to Florida in the time being. Billy Napier woke up that day thinking he's part of my signing class. And one could jump to the conclusion that maybe there was some last-minute negotiations going on before I send in my letter of intent and before you go talk about your signing class. Is that kind of what the suggestion is?
67 minutes delayed.
All right, continue.
And then with no NIL deal yet worked out, he has not enrolled yet. Florida's NIL folks have since offered him a seven-figure, $1 million deal. But in that, he has to sign a piece of paper that releases Florida, the collective, everybody from any previous claims for him to get that $1 million deal.
Okay.
He's not doing that because he's been promised $13 million.
Right.
And we've talked about this before. If nobody passes up, it was John Calipari, we talked about this, who is promised $9 million a year for a long-term contract, or forever he gets $1 million a year. Nobody passes up $9 million a year to take $1 million a year. So they expect this maybe to go to litigation at some point.
That basically we had an agreement with you in principle or a signed agreement or whatever.
For $13 million.
For $13 million. You backed out on that, and you owe us up to $13 million, essentially. Yeah, and by the way, I'm not going to play a snap for you, but you still owe me that money.
Yeah, and listen, he's not going to enroll, according to The Athletic and these other reports. He's going to go somewhere else. But that litigation is going to be fascinating.
Oh, it is. Yes.
And
it's going to change the way this is done, by the way.
And I've had a couple of texts today with people who represent us. Just if we were sitting in a meeting with them, were there any red flags or documentations we need to know about? I can see the Florida lawyers asking this of the NIL collective today.
Yeah.
Well, I did send them a termination letter, which, on the surface makes it seem like there was an agreement because I had to write you a termination letter.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but that would be evidence one. Well, we had a deal because you sent me a termination letter saying the deal was off now.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to send me a termination letter if I don't have a deal.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then my second piece of evidence.
So our attorneys like that argument? They
I've not talked to them about that. I'm just saying these are the kind of meetings we would have had with them.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
The second thing that I would bring up if I was the Rashada lawyers is not only do I have this termination letter that says we had a deal, the second thing would be you are now offering me a seven-figure deal, but I've got to sign a form that releases you from all the previous claims. Well, obviously you think there are other problems that you want me to sign away here. So these are two damning things against the Florida Collective.
I would agree. It sounds like that Florida Collective is going to have to pay some money. Now, it probably gets settled. Like, they probably tell the Rashadas, you don't want to get tied up in court. We don't want to get tied up in court. House $5 million or $6 million or whatever. And if the Rashadas are smart, they think I'm never going to have to play it down there, and they're going to cut me a check for $6 million. I'll take that.
Yeah,
right?
or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever the money ends up being.
And remember, he was going to Miami for whatever was going to be offered there NIL, right? And he backed out of that verbal.
Yep.
And went to Florida. Now, this is part of the mess we're going to have moving forward without any structure in the NIL.
Well, that's why this is going to change this. I want to come back to that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so that is the landscape we have here. Jaden Rashada is a sought after quarterback. Florida's not going to have him. But if you're wondering if he's going to get released from his letter of intent that he signed and sent in, chances are good, because at some point, Scott Strickland in Florida they're not going to want this to be on the streets. It's already
not
bad.
at all.
It is already bad enough as it is. They're going to want this to go away. And this is a bad look. And this is why I believe at places like, Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, Auburn, Texas A&M, if you're an athletic department that's not walking hand in hand with the collective, or at least having some conversation with them to know what they're doing, the collective can make your school look really, really, really bad.
But keep in mind, the NCAA has some restrictions as to how much the school can get involved with some of these things. So, you would look at that and say, Florida, you got to get your house in order. And maybe that is the case. I'm not saying it's not. But also, Florida doesn't just have carte blanche to go do whatever the heck. This is not the Wild Wild West as far as the school is concerned.
Right.
It is the Wild Wild West in the NIL world, because if I happen to be a big Kansas State booster, right? And I'm like, I'm tired of us not winning the Big 12. I want to go win the Big 12. I can form my own collective. Lord knows we've had plenty of collectives reach out to us asking questions or wanting to advertise, or many different things. I mean, we've talked to a lot of them, right? Some of them you look at and you're like, they got their crap together. Some of them you look at and you're like, they don't have the first clue what they're doing. Not all of them were associated with Alabama or Auburn directly, right? Some of them were, what I'm about to describe here is, I got money. I love this football program. I want to see us be good. So if my coach tells me I want Jaden Rashada, I'm going to go out and handle this. School, you stay out of this. I'm going to go handle it. Now, you would think a businessman that's got that kind of money is smart enough to know how to keep out of a situation like this. But I think that's part of the problem is, they're getting into a business that they're not accustomed to doing. So if I were a really good NFL or a really good college football player, and I'm like, I really, Dunaway, I want you to represent me. You've never done anything like that. Who's got the advantage on negotiating a contract? The people negotiating the contract, or you? How many of you negotiated?
None.
Zero. So that's by the way, we mentioned our agents. It's one of the first things our agents ever told us. The first thing they ever told us is, your contract's only worth what they have to pay you not to show up. It's not worth what they pay you to show up or what they pay you not to show up, right? That's the first thing they told us. The second thing they told us was, get ready. Radio companies are not going to want to negotiate with us. And we're like, why would they not want to? And they're like, we run into this all the time, because our agents represent a bunch of football coaches as well. And they say the AD always wants to negotiate with the coach. Why? How many contracts has that coach negotiated? Zero.
Right.
How many has the AD negotiated? Hundreds.
They have the advantage.
They've always got the advantage. And that's what I would say in these situations is, you're probably getting people way out over their skis because they've never negotiated anything like this.
Yeah. And Goose, I understand it's not technically Florida as the collective.
That's right.
But if they're representing you, then it's your reputation that is getting bashed on the streets. Just go see Texas A&M, whose collective promised that number one recruiting class so much stuff, and some of those kids didn't get what they were promised, and they have hit the portal and left College Station. And this year's recruiting class, not as good, because some people on the recruiting trail didn't believe what the Texas A&M folks were telling them. That's why it's important at places like Auburn or Alabama, where you're promising somebody something, you damn well better deliver. If not, the word will get out.
Yeah, but the other part of the problem again, Jim, is it's the Wild Wild West. Just because a collective says we're representing the University of Florida doesn't mean Florida has endorsed that. And I don't know, it's a tricky spot for Florida too, because you got a bunch of millionaires that have put their money in that. They're donors to your school. You can't very well go to them and say, you guys got to quit this, man. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, these guys are people that are keeping your athletic department afloat. So I don't know really how to solve this, except for I don't know how to solve it. I mean, like if the schools can't just go out and say, okay, this collective is not an officially, like Auburn has, what is it, the On to Victory thing, right? Behind Bruce Pearl, and last year behind Brian Harsin. It'll soon be behind Hugh Freeze. That's their official school collective. Alabama has one. But that doesn't stop anybody from going out and saying, well, I love Auburn too. I don't want to give my money to this collective. I want to determine how my money is spent, so I'll just jump in the game. And if Auburn is recruiting, or if Alabama is recruiting Jaden Rashada, they go to him and say, hey, look, you go to Auburn, $10 million. You go to Alabama, $10 million. Right? Now, I'm not an official representative of the University of Alabama, but if you're the Rashada family, do you say, I don't want your $10 million? You're not going to say that, are you?
I don't know. I don't know.
You're crazy if you do. You're going to turn down $10 million?
I know it's a mess, and we'll see what Jaden Rashada gets out of Florida. Jaden Rashada officially asking for a release, according to reports out there. Their quarterback will be Graham Mertz next year. Nick.